I'm Chris.
I'm Rick.
And we're here to help you out.
Yeah.
Hey, we just thought that was kind of funny because we're a little relaxed. We're in New Brunswick right now. Just finished some meetings, some fitness meetings, helping each other out. If you don't know, this is Rick Kaselj from exercisesforinjuries.com. I'm Chris Lopez from kettlebellworkouts.com. And we're going to ask each other questions because Rick, ironically enough, had a back pain kettlebell training question in his customer service inbox right now. And I wanted to talk to Rick about back pain. And since that's a kettlebell question.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about kettlebells on what else this person can end up doing in order to help when it comes to the recovery of this is back surgery, because of the common thinking out there is just because you're in injury and pain you should do nothing. You should just lay down and rest and not move again, and that is the worst thing you can do in the world, because even with like professional athletes, none of them will sit and do absolutely nothing. There's very few conditions where that is required and where movement is not recommended. So let me read Jeff's question. Rick, I just started kettlebell training and really like it. Before my lumbar fusion operation in November of last year, I have bought and I'm doing the lumbar fusion exercises you put together, and you answered some of my questions concerning weight training, like could I ever squat and deadlift again. So I have a specific program called Lumbar Fusion Exercises, and it's a program for people that have had lumbar fusion, things to avoid and the things to do to help overcome lumbar fusion. But once again, that's part of the process of recovery, because just like with Jeff, I mean, he wants to get back to doing what he did before, and he can. He just has to train smarter. Now, the second part, my question is, whenever I can resume, when I can resume kettlebell training, I've been doing some weight training, but I really would like to get back to kettlebell training. Is there any exercise routine with kettlebells that I should avoid? And Chris will cover that part. I was nowhere near starting double kettlebell training, which is quite advanced, but I would like to at some point in time. I'm not looking to get certified. I want to lose some fat and become more defined. So that's Jeff C. Thank you for the question. So did you want to maybe kind of cover the part where it's like, are there any exercises he should avoid, that Jeff should avoid?
Anything that has to do with potential flexing of that lumbar spine, he should definitely avoid. He wants to get back into swinging, and we've spoken about this before. Yeah. The swing is the foundational movement for hardstyle training, and it's a great movement, but you have to make sure that you've tightened up and iced your hinge pattern. So by hinging, what I mean is the swing is a hip dominant movement. It's not a squat movement, and you can tell just by using your kettlebell, because it'll give you great feedback. If you've got a squatty swing, then the kettlebell 9 times out of 10 will droop down, because you're coming from a low position on the ground to a vertical position. Whereas if you've got a hinge pattern, a proper hinge pattern when you're swinging a kettlebell, then that means that you're getting it to what we call point C, which is the back wall. And when you hinge or explosively extend your hips, the kettlebell will float out to the horizon or maybe even flip up. So Jeff, if you're doing your training right now and you're noticing that the kettlebell is drooping down, that means that you've got a squatty swing, probably, and that you should really work more on hinging your hips. So we're talking about a vertical shin angle where your shins are straight up and down. You can bend your knees slightly, but you want your butt as far back as you can get it, where your spine is either in neutral or probably in a better situation if you've got spinal fusion, in an arched position. And that's ideally what you want to do. Now, the double kettlebell swing is actually a different beast because it loads your anterior chain a little bit more. So you've got a wider stance, and that's why it is a more advanced exercise. Because of the wider stance, you're not able to get into that posterior chain as much, so you really, again, have to emphasize getting deep into that hinge as far as you can, because the handles are so big and you've got to get them through your knees.
Yeah. But it's one of those things, it's not that you cannot do it forever. You'll need to progress to it. With injuries, you'll need to kind of slowly progress to things and just be smarter. You can't just jump into it like you're 19 and master it in 5 minutes. It takes, got to be a little bit smarter. And then the other thing I like about like the kettlebell swing, it really teaches that hip hinging, which you highlighted, which is so important, because when we start getting flexion or curling of that low back, it puts way more load in that spine. And if you have a sensitive back pain, a back injury, or a lumbar fusion, you want to keep that spine in neutral and eliminate that flexion, because it increases the risk of irritation, injury, or even worse, injury. And the other thing I like about the hinge is you're building strength and endurance throughout different ranges of motion of the body. So with the hinge, you're building hip strength throughout various ranges of motion. You're not isolating a specific range. And then you're also building core strength through different ranges of motion. And then really, probably the most important thing ends up being the endurance side of things. So I find a lot of people, if they look at other exercise programs, they don't do enough hip hinging exercises. And the kettlebell's a great one. They don't work on working that strength, building strength throughout the whole range of motion, and then building core strength and endurance throughout the whole range of motion. Yeah, you might be great at doing the plank and doing the plank for 5 minutes, but then as you start adding hip flexion into it, the activation in the core totally changes.
It's good. You know what, Jeff, another thing that I wanted to say was you really want to make sure that you've got an excellent T-spine or thoracic spine mobility as well.
Yes.
If you go by a joint-by-joint approach, and you and I talked about this in an interview before, your joints alternate, usually they alternate from joints of stability to joints of mobility. And with your spine fused, especially in your lumbar area now, you've lost a lot of that mobility, so you've got to make sure that you've got almost excessive mobility in that upper back area.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not excessive might not be the word, but I mean, you're looking at trying to get as much thoracic movement as you can throughout that thoracic spine. Because some people might have greater movement or mobility in like the lower thoracic spine and less in the upper thoracic spine. So trying to build that movement in the thoracic spine, but also balancing it without by not going crazy with it, meaning, you know, doing 100 repetitions of thoracic mobility a day. Then we start getting into the overuse side of things, and it can be harmful as opposed to beneficial. It's that balance that people need to find.
One more question I actually had for you was, if we're talking about mobility, how important, if you've got a low back injury, is hip mobility?
Oh, and it was a thought that came to my mind when you're talking about it is massive. It's massive. So that was the second thing I was going to say. Like a lot of times people will look at the injury and focus just on the injury, but a lot of times you got to look above and below to see what's happening. And a lot of times, you know, we looked above when it comes to that thoracic spine, but also looking below in the hips, and it being a huge thing, because what'll happen is things will tighten up in the hips in order to protect that low back. And, you know, but that tightening up a lot of times they'll end up being over tightening up, loss of movement, loss of mobility, loss of flexibility, and that'll end up leading to greater stress on the back, because that increased tightness in the hip ends up putting greater stress on different areas. So it's either the knee will get stressed or the back will get stressed, and one of them eventually will go.
Because that mobility has to come from somewhere.
It has to come
right?
from
And
somewhere.
if you've got tight hips, and because that's a ball and socket joint, you don't have that mobility there, it's going to go either one up or one down. So which is why if you've got tight hips, then a lot of times you'll see people with low back injuries or knee injuries.
Definitely. Or it's that, you know, it's that looking at ways of decreasing the stress on that injured area. So, you know, when we injure ourselves, almost in every part of the body, you know, tension it occurs, and that tension is a protective mechanism in order to protect that injured area, so the more damage does not come to that area. And then as the brain realizes, okay, it's okay, I'm not going to cause more damage, this is not as serious as I thought, that tension decreases. And then we need to find ways with exercises to kind of help speed up that process of decreasing that tension, but then adding other protection in our exercise. That's the core, that's hip strength throughout the full range of motion, and working on that core endurance. That's the protection side of things. And then with like the mobility work, we're releasing that tension.
Good stuff. So, you think that answered Jeff's question?
Yeah, Jeff, that was a real brief reply to your question. But I thought it was important with having Chris here and myself that we kind of come at it from different angles, and I think it'd be beneficial to everyone. So if you guys do have guys, gals, mums, dads, and whatever it is, if you have questions, definitely let Chris and I know, and we're more than happy to reply to them, because I get a lot of benefit of getting questions and customer support, and then doing videos like this and replying to you personally. But then also I know someone else has that question, and it's going to be beneficial to someone else down the road.
All right, so where can they find us, Rick?
Yeah. Am I going to go through my 3-step process?
Well, I'll do one of them, so why don't you do the first one?
Okay, so make sure, if you want to visit me, head on over to exercisesforinjuries.com. Just that's my hub. You can enter in your injury or pain. It's a good chance I have a video, article, interview on your injury or pain.
If you need me, kettlebellworkouts.com or fitandbusydad.com. If you're interested in kettlebell training, anything kettlebell training, I've got a ton of experts on kettlebellworkouts.com. If you're interested in what I'm doing with my practices and everything, then fitandbusydad.com. That's where you can get me. And it's just like Rick said, just type in what your issue is in the search bar and you'll probably come up with an answer.
Yeah, exactly. And then wherever you're watching this video, on YouTube or whatever channel, make sure you head up above, subscribe to this, and what that'll mean is you'll end up getting a video from myself or Chris every couple days on some sort of kettlebell topic, and for me it'll be like some injury or pain topic. And then make sure to head down below, hit like, and leave Chris and I a question or a comment about this video.
All right.
So this is Rick Kaselj
and Chris Lopez
coming to you from New Brunswick, saying take care and bye-bye.
Bye, guys.